Okay. Hello everyone, welcome to another Mr.Within episode. Hopefully my voice is loud and clear. I wanted to, in this evening's episode, dive into the concept of memory and how we as human beings are actually a very judgmental animal by design. What that means is we are designed by the world to judge, evaluate, and then through decision making arrive at a certain destination. Memory I think the sound should be available now. Should be audible. But anyways, what I'm trying to say is memory makes us a judgmental animal. And this is a very important viewpoint because we are conscious animals. And our consciousness is very unique to all the other types of species found on this planet. Other animals have memory, of course, but what they do with their memory, how they emerge as an accumulation of information is very different than how we do. So I made some notes, not just certain guidelines for this episode, certain pointers that I'm gonna attempt to go through. This episode is a bit laid back. If it's not for the taste of the audience, time will go forth and the universe will change eventually. So the first thing is that when someone talks about memory, we speak about it in association to some form. We say this is this person's memory, that is that person's memory. Do you know? And let's say in the future we had a machine that in the way future, let's say 300 years from now, there was a machine that it was like a hat, and you put this hat on the person and the hat had a screen on it, and on that screen you could see their inner realms. Thanks for letting me know in the chat section. I'm going to reduce the audio of the background, so hopefully it should be better. Anyways, to continue. Where was I? Yeah, so when it comes to memory, first we understand memory in accordance to something. And of course, in this modern time, everything in reality revolves around individualism, around the self. I make this point often in these talks that really we have to look at ourselves if we want the meaning of life to update and evolve, you know? If we keep looking in the outer realms, we will just see infinite change, and that can unmotivate a person, you know? So, memory is connected to the idea of a self. It's an egoic construct. It is a self. It's an individualism that is like the true container of memory. At least for now, how we are acknowledging it. My true understanding of memory, which I'm going to attempt to share in this episode, is very different than how we treat the concept now. And so that's why before beginning, I got to find much more unchanging music. Hold on, guys. This is a song. I need this kind of song. There we go. This is one of my favorite. The song I'm going to play right now is one of my favorite songs on this planet. I think it's like whoever made the song was a genius. But anyways. All right. Our intelligence in the moment has two components. We classify that as mind and body. What we find the mind is doing is recording like a camera, as if our eyes are a camera and our brain is like the is like, you know, the SD drive, you know, and our brain is the camera really. And so we are recording reality, and then this reality inside the camera is being edited and then shared, right? If we were to take the camera metaphor. So because every person has a mind and a body, when we look at our memory, it is a sort of watching mover through moments, and what it remembers, tends to remember, is what was real to it, right? There's this, I remember I was reading this in an article a while back where they were saying that people have two types of memory. They have a long-term memory and they have a short-term memory, right? Their short-term memory, maybe like, I don't know, it was like a couple seconds or something. It was a certain number, like a person can remember something for a certain amount of time and then it can leave them. But those people who, whatever they were doing in this life, it went into their long-term memory. They, in some sense, remembered that incident, you know, from their childhood or wherever always. And what that means is the state that we're in suggests how information is received to even be remembered, right? You can say someone driven by necessity will have way more inspiration to understand something than one driven by the desire for luxury, because of the seriousness of the moment. So our memories are actually moments in life, and these moments in life that we go through, they imprint something upon us. Now, if the imprint is deep, we consider that the long-term memory. If the imprint is not deep, short-term memory. Now, at the same time, if we were to ask ourselves, how can a person remember? Because even though we go through life, let's say you're walking through a zoo, or let's say you're walking through an art gallery and you're seeing all the artwork from the beginning, you're seeing all the artwork from in the gallery from the beginning, and let's say your mind remembers a couple of them. The ones that you had an emotional amplification, that means you saw an artwork that brought your emotions out, or the artwork related to something familiar to the person, right? So it's as if we are, and of course I have to go a bit deeper here in the sense of explaining, prior to the personality having a relationship with what it in quotations calls memory, there is something else going on prior to humanism, a dehumanized explanation of intelligence. In that dehumanized explanation of intelligence, it is not the life of a person that is happening in this world, it is an intelligence that is swimming, or I shouldn't say swimming, that is navigating through form, right? So imagine it's like this invisible energy that the moment it was thrown into a visible realm, every moment it began expressing itself through. And of course, it's our information that suggests who we are in this life, really. You know, somebody has the wrong information, they in some sense are found in the bottom of the hierarchy. Those who have the right information, they're found in the top of the social hierarchy, you know, the hierarchies of civilization, which institutions kind of throw or leash us with. So anyways, if we were to look at a dehumanized situation of what is happening with a human being that is using memory. It is the fruition of accumulated form. That means this is something where when I say it in these talks, I try to be playful about it. But if people had a sort of a philosophical seriousness in trying to see what is the picture I'm painting, I would say that there are, I would say, bizarre moments of mind, bizarre states of mind. So let's say there's good states of mind, you're super happy in, and bad states of mind where you're sad in, and then there are states of mind where literally there can't be at least any past emotion on it. That means imagine something happens that has never happened before. How would we know how to react to it, right? So the novelty of how that moment goes forth doesn't relate to the past or the future. So what I'm saying is, if a moment of awareness is in some sense how a creature relates to reality, if the reality has form or if the reality is formless, it changes the identity of the being. I'll tell you something about myself that I never knew I could do. Before I started giving these talks that were it started in 2014 when I started giving these talks. Before that, I wasn't a person who could remember things on command. Not that I couldn't remember, but I had to just sit down and go back to that moment in my inner realms and try to recreate it accurately in accordance to the emotional residue I had, and in some sense to generate it that way. But then something unique happened, especially in the evolution of these talks and my psychology in attempting this, was that I began to see memory has no owner. That means what a person thinks it's their memory or their identity or something that just happened to them, they will, in a macrocosmic perspective, the independence of the interdependence, the linking of everything together makes your memory no longer have an owner. So there will come in the mystical understanding a moment where you are sight before your eyes. And when I say before, I don't mean it in the pun-like sense of in front of the person. I mean it in the sense that before your eyes was not this, right? And to remember a state where you are not this means a state where memory, this giant ocean of information, doesn't have a narrow filter of an ego anymore. So what tends to happen is that man accesses, and in ancient yogic thought they called this the Akashic record or whatever, I call it the inventor sphere. Man accesses a non-humanized, a dehumanized state where knowledge has nowhere to go. It is. That means it's like, how do you teach people what the color blue is? You show them, and when you show them blue is blue, right? The color blue is blue. We call it blue. It just is it, right? So there is a level where all information on this planet is. It's just being. It has no doership. It has no doing of the sort, if people can understand what I'm saying here. And whoever's listening, if you've been listening to these talks for a while, I encourage your engagement in the chat section of the episode. So, a further analysis at what is memory, and we find that the story of our life is produced by memory. It's as if memory is the film producer, is the film producer of our identity in the present moment. Right now, when I'm speaking, I think about it to myself. What can I as a human being talk about to other human beings logically? Like if we were to really look at what another human being can say to another human being, we fragment it through time where a human being can talk about the past, where the human being can talk about the present, where the human being can talk about the future, and then it once begins speaking about the relationship of these three, and then there is no time. That means that means attention has no dictionary. The true presence of intelligence in this realm. It is a languageless, beyond the language threshold phenomenon. But in this episode, I'm gonna try to at least share with the audience the transition that happened in my inner realms. Starting from a kid, I was a person who, in my youth, I couldn't. I have a twin brother, and my twin brother's imagination activated way earlier than mine. You know, my imagination in my youth, I remember I was just trying to see like giant letters on walls, like in my inner realms as an overlay on the outer realms. Like that's what I could visualize. But only when life became important, there was an important dimension activated in it, where from just relying on strategy that didn't generate from your mind, you begin kind of following the rhythms of your own eyes, if I can say it in a mystical sense. And in today's society, all our judgments require time, because if we didn't have time, what are we judging the person towards? You know? The present moment, the here and now that many sages and wise men and scholars talk about, be here, be right now, look at the world, understand your world. Like this whole here and now is actually nothing. Why? Because the moment the past and future are out of the picture, there is only the present. So in the ancient yogic algorithm, in the history of humanity, what has happened is by getting rid of the past and the future, we have gotten rid of the ego, the I thought, which actually was the relationship of the memory, which was its own karma. So one can say the way things are introduced to a person create their expectation. If in life something happens and they don't expect it, the person says it's my karma. But actually your karma is how attributeless attention, accepted attention through the waves of accepted attributes to attention, a format through the waves of information that hit you. What I mean by that is that, for example, in my youth, when I was a child, I was raised in an environment where religious idea was around me. What does that mean? That means imagine souls kind of like these paratroopers kind of like jumping into the Earth's atmosphere. I'm saying this, of course, playfully and abstract. But imagine if like, you know, unfathomable higher dimensional beings skydived into this realm. And as they skydived into the realm, each was thrown in their own sector. And what it is that it's invisible Hunger Games of manifested events, events of nature, you know. You know, it's like we're reaching a point in human history where we can't be I thoughts anymore. We can't be thoughts anymore. It doesn't make sense. We know too better. We see the interdependency of an infinitely changing world. So man is left to even have a new relationship with his own mind and memory. Right? Because identity is memory. Even imagination is like the memory is being used as paint. If somebody said, what does the present moment give the person? The present moment gives the person an ability to witness the past and future simultaneously. You know, memory is like a string. You pull from one side of it, you get to the attributeless presence of nature. You pull it from another side, you get to the infinite survival of a habit, a routine, a repetition. So the unknown is one's greatest teacher. There is no human being that is a teacher of mankind. We're just, at best, comrades in the same battlefield of information. There's no such thing as a student and teacher, I'm telling you. The more I look at this life, the more it becomes clear to me that just like Freud made this comment, Freud was a psychologist, that he looked at the concept of God and he pretty much connected it to daddy issues, And what I mean by that is, like they say, Nietzsche said God is dead, Freud said God is dad. And so it's as if the human's inability to be found content in an attributeless state is causing it till the end of time to viciously try to become a creature of attribute, a creature of form. And honestly, what does memory give you? I mean, aside from being an archive of geometry, endless geometry of all the things you have seen here in your life, aside from being a geometry archive, a design archive, memory is just a tool waiting for a user. That's pretty much the deal with energy. Our attention commands it into the moment. For me, my inner divinity, my relationships with the logos, they have always been in a sense where there is something of higher rank above me. That means right now we have no system of classification of ranks, right? But in certain ancient thought, for example, in the 6th century, in monotheistic traditions, I am familiar with the Islamic tradition. In the Islamic tradition, religion, if you notice, spirituality is seen as blasphemy. From the religious mentality, and I always wondered why. Why is the spiritual blasphemous, and why is that an issue? And the answer is that in some sense the soul is the secret of God. So there could be the chance that right now, as I'm giving these talks, there are religious people looking at me being like, buddy, it's a secret, what are you talking about? But I will tell you, it's not that there is a truth to find. It's the Enlightenment era of storytelling. It's coming to an end. I think I catched like the last wave. We're going towards a more design-oriented and geometry-based realm. That means it's the sophistication of the inner character. It's the evolution of who you are behind your eyes, being an instantaneous shift of your whole approach as intelligence in the world. Anyways, this memory, if one was to, let's say, exercise a quest, and we see in video games there's a quest, and a quest is something outside of the player in the realm, in the simulation, whether it's a pixel video game or whether it's an elemental atomic video game, simulation. It's like the character in the video game wanting to know what it was before it was a character. I don't know how many people have cared about this, but I have actually wondered as a human being about my earliest memory in this life. Both voluntarily and involuntarily, this has occurred for me, where I have gone to the earliest memory I have, and then I have wondered what was here before I was, and what are the potentials that I was that before I was this, right? Because we're found in the biological body, of course, we instantaneously accept we're just this, right? But if we were to wonder about the texture of an unconditional, formless intelligence, the monotheistic religions, I can connect the idea here that somebody went to the prophet and asked and said, what is the soul? And the prophet explained the soul in the sense of that different souls, different human beings had a different solar rank. What that means is it's as if it's like a military. It's as if the whole life on Earth is a giant project, a multidimensional project, and multidimensional beings have entered the system to, in some sense, attend to it. But these multidimensional beings are like one giant crew. And as one giant crew, each have a different rank. I'm just expanding the metaphor here, right? So, and the saying was that souls of the same rank know each other. Can in some sense access each other's intelligence. It's as if like the soldier cannot access the general, the soldier can access the commanding officer, but the commanding officer can access the general. For example, if we were to have this mentality of body, mind, soul, soldier, commanding officer, general. So it is, I find this to be true, but not just because the souls have a rank. It's as if like the intent of existence. The intent of existence is like a seed was planted in the soil, and its design is already in it. Its ultimate intention will appear as it will be realized the moment it abides by nature. The future of an animal it's like what we find in 2021, man being an evolutionary judgmental animal. We find the judgmental animal. In the future, the body is going to enter the mind. And when the body enters the mind, it's this weird thing where before the person actually is inside a location, they are a quality of being. It's remarkable how much we are, the edge of the language threshold is everywhere. From every unknown moment, knowledge can recalibrate. My own attachment to my inner realms and its memories, only when I need to be a person, I animate it. That means what I mean by that, only I need to be a person, is that when I, like I went through a whole, some years really not entangled, but diving into the idea of meditation. I ultimately concluded that it is the presence of silence, just like how in silence there is a truth before any word is spoken, and even though truths are spoken, everything goes back to silence. And it's the same for movement, that the truth of movement is stillness. So when a person realizes silence and stillness is the source of reality, when one goes into a state of silence and stillness, their mind begins moving and living a life faster. Think of it this way, that your mind's life and your body's life are two lives simultaneously happening, and they each are going at a certain speed. Let's say your body is going 50 kilometers per hour, and your mind, you're in your inner realms, the idea of you is going 50 kilometers per hour. A person who goes 50-50, they will be happy, but they will not be fascinated. That means sometimes, I wonder if happiness can be a distraction from the responsibility towards greater dimensions. Information has updated into human intelligence elemental information. And the information is a vehicle for the inner witness. So information is, you know what it is? It's as if like consciousness is inside language and language is inside our body. What I mean is that the mind is driving the body and the soul poetically is driving the mind. So in other words, the soul is driving the mind and body. The mind is being driven by the soul, to move in the body, move in the vehicle of the body, and the body has nowhere else to have meaning in aside from a mind which requires a soul to in some sense move it. Now this idea, I got to bring in this analogy of in the Bhagavad Gita there was something like this where it was as if like a chariot. Imagine a chariot where the horses are your sensory perception. They're the realm of Maya and Samsara, the body, So the horses of a chariot, imagine that's a metaphor for the dimension of physical existence, the body. Then the chariot driver was a metaphor for the dimension of the mind. That means the intelligence of the person, shape the conscious intelligence of the person. And then the soul was the truth sitting inside the chariot. So the soul is hidden behind the mind intentionally. That means how would I say it? It's like not everything can be revealed, so nature decides, really. Now imagine that you are like the horses and you are wondering what is steering me in this life. Then you suddenly realize your body is like honestly like a soldier at the command of your mind. That means I can't tell you how sometimes, when I do simple things, I'm just fascinated by the biological intelligence. Like our human reflexes, our ability to suddenly know, like, as if somebody is staring at us from behind, even though our face is completely a different angle. So the intelligence of the body is like this aura of ever-growing complexity, So imagine the soldier, upon the recognition of the commanding officer, the horses realize that whatever they do, the forces of the universe are like the strings connecting them to the chariot driver. And this is another way of saying your mind simulates meaning. That means there is a truth beyond our eyes, but the only way we can understand it is with our eyes, but our eyes are not beyond our eyes. Do you see the complexity? So, The body has to trust the commanding officer, and this means stillness of the body brings the awareness to the activity of the mind. Now, the commanding officer, once the soldier listens to the commanding officer, the mind, can stop meddling with the body, listening to the soldier. I mean, like being distracted by the soldier, and the commanding officer can run to go and report to the general what is going on in the battlefield. And you know, honestly, in warfare, in military strategy, you know, the general that lost the communication with his army would lose the war. Sun Tzu would said something remarkable like this, that if two generals, imagine two of the most skilled generals of humanity, they're facing one another, right? If one general manages to disconnect the army, the relationship of the army with the commanding officers and ultimately to the general, it's like that strategy where you cut the head of the snake. Or if you're in a situation with multiple problems, instantly go and solve the biggest problem first. So communication between the body, mind, soul, and the soldiers and the commanding officers and the general is the key to proper victory of biology, of our evolution as an animal that has judged itself from its memory and imagination. The only reason we have the word imagination is because there is a witness to the inner realms. Because there is a witness in the inner realms, the observer within. That observer within creates a space where the reaction of the mind to the body can be watched from a superior point. So we think that the body is receiving senses and the mind is animating, but what is actually happening is the body is receiving senses, the mind is responding to it, and something else is watching the mind to decide what the commanding officer does and what command goes to the soldier to, in some sense, use it as a force to win the victory. And heaven and hell as archetypes, they are problems of the commanding officer. That means the soul trusts that the mind will live in a way in this life that it will, like the soul trusts the mind, right? But if the mind doesn't trust its body and the body doesn't have the proper orders from the mind, the commands, in some sense the body is dismissed. So reality is a battle not against our lives or the fictions we run towards. It is in some sense trying to find the ultimate instantly. This is how you know you're a mystic. If any moment in this life, without anyone telling you anything, you just stopped for a second and wondered about the whole universal position. Where am I? As if that question was shouted by, like, heard in the skies everywhere in the universal sector, and all species on all fathomable planets started to wonder, what is the sky saying, you know? And so the day the sky spoke was the day human beings realized infinity has been among us this whole time. It is the current of meaning. That means based on how, if the body fails, the commanding officer fails. You know, the commanding officer will go on its last stance, but then the commanding officer is dismissed. If the war gets serious. But something cool that happens, if the soldiers fail, and then there is a chance the commanding officers will fail. This is where in the battle, the general becomes the hidden guardian angel behind every commanding officer. And what I mean by this, guys, just take this in. In battle, imagine you're a commanding officer, the soldiers, and imagine it's like some ancient Greek warfare movie scene, okay? Some sort of gladiator level kind of, cinematography, And so imagine that the soldiers in the front lines, they have in some sense served their duty, and they have maxed out their efficiency to the realm, and they have transitioned, right? The commanding officer is the soldiers of the other army are about to invade the commanding officer, and this is where the general, before this happens, for example, has planned a side attack, because in battle, sometimes offense is the best defense. Because if you hit, imagine a critical part of, let's say 2 armies facing one another. If you attack the general, imagine you tell all your soldiers, just go attack the general or something. Imagine in a war, right? So the general has to defend himself at the same time attack. So it's honestly a sword and shield game, but with giant armies of men. That's what war has been. It's honestly 2 people fighting, but it has been amplified and, dramatically into the expression of like World War level, I don't know how clearly I painted that picture, but so what I'm trying to say is that when the body, and now imagine a scene where the body, it doesn't have to be as intense as like this battle scene kind of metaphor I'm using, but imagine a moment where your body has listened to your mind. This is the voice of conscience and intuition, which our society has exiled because it's not cool enough. It's like, what happened to all the spiritual people on the planet, It's like they weren't cool for society, and ancient traditions and methodologies were all lost, because people wanted to fit in, take this into a normality, but the normal is in a changing world. So there has never been anything normal if we have the concept of novelty. Any person who believes in the idea that something new can happen, that means the concept of normal never existed. Novelty in the room, or in some sense a snapshot photograph of, this is just what we are, and so the species has to choose if it wants a future that is a photograph, or if it wants a future that is a film. And that decision will suggest how much we will be a natural entity in the future and how much we won't. Me personally, when I give these talks, I sometimes think about the options. I think, okay, one option is nobody ever hears the talk. Another option is, these are the extremes of the spectrum. Everybody hears. Imagine one day I wake up and everybody on the planet has heard of Mr.Within talk, and I'll be like, wait a minute. So these are possibilities, right? These are probabilities of how the moment can move, but they are the extreme edges, right? Once I have seen the extreme edges of the reality, fathomed it, and to some degree have had a relationship with that wave of information to come to a contentment and comfort, after I understand the extremes, like how far the system can expand, then you try to find the center of the system. So my strategy would be to find the edge of the system, then be inspired to go to the center of the system. Something like that. I don't know how else to explain it. But really, beyond living a life as a body, what happens to memory is that the direct experiential witness. That means right now, as I'm speaking to you, I am a witness. I am watching my body, like my mouth, move, and my mind is like this invisible overlay of all the ideas I know so far, accessible to me now, right? And then there's a watcher, there's the presence, and this watcher is the whole moment, as if your moment was a sphere around you, and you're not just what's in the sphere, you're the whole sphere. When you reach that point, the inventor's sphere, I will tell you, there is information everywhere. There is endless hidden designs in this realm. It's just our sight, our approach activates it or makes us to never be able to see it, you know. When it comes to, I should probably talk about past lives here. I mean, it's a fascination for many. I could totally see, like, some people, if they knew who they were in a past life, they'd be like, "Yo, I was that. I have more confidence now." You know, you know, to remember your past life. Even though there are some mystics, for example, Sadhguru, where he said, if you remembered your past life, it might drive you insane in this life. Why? Because you are associating another universe with the current universe that is happening. Or earlier today I was talking about David Hume's guillotine, what is and what ought to be. What the ought to be is the imposition of the free will, which is a simulation in the void, and what is, and it has no reason to explain itself. That means when the commanding officer when your mind moves your body, the body doesn't say, "I don't want to listen to that signal." Imagine your brain's like, giving a signal through your nerves to move your to move your body, you know. And the person's like, "All right, I'm gonna open a door," and then suddenly the body, imagine, is like, "I don't want to open this door," and you'd be like, "Oh my God, the soldier is rebelling." That means if the soldier does not listen to the commanding officer, the soldier was never a soldier. It is in some sense dead wood. And what I mean by that is that the body is being, let's say, contrasted to the performance of the mind, and the mind is being contrasted to the awareness of the presence of Allah. And what enlightenment can there be? Like, people in the New Age community are going to wake up while being awake, you know? So guys, my attention has come to the chat section. James says, "What's up, no sound?" Pla says, "I got sound, but background sound a bit too loud." Cheers. Dan says, "What's up?" Dan says, "Damn nice piloting tonight." Yep. Thanks, man. Yusuf says, "The more I listen to you, the more I understand your vision, more and more I can see what you see." That's good to hear, you know, because honestly, like, a person can paint something until a certain result, but then the mind moves on, you know? Like, I will tell you something that I have had ideas on some days where I didn't share the idea, like I didn't record the idea, and I didn't write it down, but it was such a magnificent idea that for that day I was just shocked, you know? Can you imagine, like, realizing something huge about life, at least to yourself, you know, and then your whole day is blissed out. Your whole day is blissed out in the sense that nothing is as important as the flight of intelligence in the void. And we have to be careful as a species. That means people should never think that it's there's a concept of leadership. Let me tell you why. Because every person has to be at their most advanced state. That would be the greatest leadership. So it would be that leaders have to just create leaders. Because in doing so, the standard of global ability rises. And communication is key. Like, I don't think human beings, like, we as a species take this in, like how many different nations, cultures, and animations of the human intelligence there are, how many different Homo sapiens roam the surface of this world, you know, the surface of this earth. So what it is we have, like, think about it. It's as if, like, what does the human being have in, as a resource to respond to the end of time, you know? We have endless geometry. We have uniqueness. We have 8 billion human beings, each with different DNA. Now, if you think about it, just in your inner realms, if you were to visualize a planet where this be human, okay, let's say a version of this moment where everybody is doing the most advanced thing they can, even though it's not possible. Like you're probably not going to be able to imagine it completely, but imagine just a world where there were no mistakes. The friction was gone. The friction of ignorance was gone, and it was just this instant, every moment, everywhere you saw, even you saw young children, you would see each of them, like each person. Like when I remember my own childhood, I remember that I had less of an opinion on the world, and so I would try more new things. The more I became opinionated, the less it was as if the inner realms were being shackled to the imagery of the outer. Like, I don't know how to tell you, but we are, I don't want to say we are enslaved by memory, but we have to build a civilization where everybody gets to demonstrate why their ancestors lived so far. This is why the value of every human life is profound. It doesn't matter, because it's on some level, it's not just that we biologically look different from one another, it is also like there is different colors of thought. There is different beliefs. Like after each person has to get out of the maze by vertically leaving it and establishing a global archetype. Speed up our future or attempt to advance. We have to, it's like, not only imagine the future as far as possible, but then try to multiply that. That means it's like infinity plus one, So, the edge of the universe, one edge of the universe is a subjective, non-physical mind and awareness and space. So an edge of the human being's perception and universe is space. And the other edge of it is form in that space. It's remarkable how we are a design, and something in this world for those mystically minded gives away how there is interference of a higher intelligence here. You know what gives it away? That there's something way beyond us here that's simultaneously active, What gives it away is just how we have design, how there is a shape. That means if it was an empty piece of paper, that's understandable, but it's an empty piece of paper where there is a unique geometric design. Like, look at whoever's listening to me, look at your body. We are like literally like if you look at how a leaf is, you could look at the skeletal structure of man. So in some sense, we are like like this unique geometry where there is symmetry in our genetics, but at the same time, it's like I can't connect the back of my ring finger, for example, to my forearm of the same hand. Like, I can't do that, right? But it's like you see the limits of the genetical design, the biological design. The poet Rumi, an incredible, fascinating human being with a remarkable inner realm, he said, truth is like a mirror that has been shattered into different pieces. And when he says it was shattered in different pieces, every piece of the mirror reflects the one absolute truth that is in every moment. The truth where facts are standing on. Our memory is an image house. It's like, oh my God, that person in their inner realms is living in, like, imagine the 1900s. The mind is so fascinating. Like, I am so astonished. And really, when they say something like, let's say a miracle happens and they say the person was speechless at how the moment went forth, I totally understand that. I am telling you, life is like this: 50% noise, 50% silence. That means from the sounds that we hear, meaning arise, but the silence has a meaning too. When you look at a blank page and you have words with spaces in between, right? That space in between, when we communicate, is silence. And so any person who touches silence first, there's a scene in Gladiator which is a genius movie scene, legendary. And let me tell you what the scene is. It's the scene where before Maximus, the main character, played by Russell Crowe, before that character goes into fight in any battle, he takes the dirt and he, in some sense, washes his hands with the dirt. Now, on one level, he's adjusting his grip to hold his sword, but from another level, you can see he's reminding himself he's made of dirt and there's nothing to fear. That to the dirt we return, When I think about how I'm being a self to myself, it has to do with activating energy. So what we call living is image updating, internally at least. I don't know what to say, really. I get this feeling that a strange silent era for the cultural program is ahead, and the species will bypass its cruelty through silent observation. What else can we do? It's pretty much two outcomes. We turn into wild, vicious animals, and power and force begin trying to, control the land, or we forget that child's play and truly utilize the mind while we're given. When you look at a person, for example, let's say Albert Einstein, Da Vinci, Rabindranath Tagore, when you look at these people, like, they had something remarkable going on in their minds that allowed them to express in many fields. Now, imagine that to the scale of 8 billion. Imagine in the future there came a pill, and this pill was called genius. And so everybody who took this pill, they became suddenly a genius. Just maxed out genius. Eventually, where the witness is stationed will be discovered. You know what it is? It's like your life is like a soccer game, imagine, where the soccer player is the body, the coach is the mind, and the referee is the conscience, and the, let's say, fans and the family members of the players, they are in some sense kind of like the soul watching, you know. That means there is an incredibly disembodied audience of intelligence here. Intelligence beyond form still has a subtler, you could say, mental, energetic presence. That means moments capture time. They capture, like our energy. Right now, me speaking in like this place I am, the memory is generated out of just the design of this world. Beyond the judgmental animal, the future that awaits us is beyond language. And the era of the exploration for truth begins, Right now, whatever idea I have of myself, in a minute from now, there will be another present moment where I will have an idea of myself. Right? That's how the nature of the mind works. The antenna receives the signal. And the signal is like a rhythm, it's like a current. So I would say the way I'm saying that we're an antenna, the mind is like a person putting their right hand in the river safely to feel the current of the river passing between their fingers, So it would be something where our mind and our mental state, actually I don't want to use the word actually mental state, I'll say our inner space, in accordance to how we pilot it. It's as if space is an intelligent being and the first name we gave to it was emptiness. The species will wake up. That's it. There was a yogi by the name of Kabir, and Kabir shouts at one of his disciples, this enlightened yogi, and he says, "Disciple," and the disciple is just there, and he says, "Disciple, tell me, what is God?" He commands, he shouts it, and the disciple, in some sense, in that moment, says, "God is the breath inside the breath." And that is like the right answer of the world. That truth is within the within, an inconceivable being. Knowledge is going to hit an apocalypse. What that means is it's like it hasn't happened yet. Educational systems are still selling language, but when it changes into retaliation against an existential circumstance, our memory is just walking in another world. I will tell you this, perhaps one of the most strangest things someone can say, that we don't have a memory. There is a subjective world we're standing in which we have not explored. And when we move around in that subjective realm, we feel thoughts are coming and going. But that subjective realm is alive. So guys, in the chat section, someone has written an incredible comment. Daniel Martin says, yeah, like we're painting the body of a multidimensional hyperspace being with human language as we're riding it through space-time. Yeah, the maturity of the species to have an ability to see the planet alive. Right now we're like human lives matter. In the future, right now we're like all lives matter. In the future, when aliens land, we're gonna say all human lives matter. Then there's gonna come a time in history where robots are gonna say all digital lives matter. And then aliens will also say all alien lives matter. And it's going to reach a point where what can creatures that are in the same space do? They can just efficiently maneuver. That means we think fish are stupid creatures, and that's a humorous statement, but really what it is their intelligence is so incredible. When you see a school of fish move, none of them hit each other. None of them have an impact. It's like you see thousands of tiny fish moving as a giant group in these nature documentaries, And so you see the fish, none of them colliding with one another, as if they are abiding in the same field of existential design and understanding, That means upon the recognition of a mind that can access infinity and contemplate the beyond, and advance towards it, all violent and cruel and evil people on the planet were like, what are we doing? Using the body to break things rather than using the mind to build things. That is the era we need to go, where thugs in the streets make sure kids all go, no longer are in the streets, right? So we have to attempt the best if we ever want to see what it looks like even. My simplest answer to why should we build an advanced civilization, because don't you want to see what it looks like at least? Even though if, let's say we build an advanced civilization and it just exists for 7 days and then it collapses, right? I would say those 7 days will become the greatest mythology, The world is alive, but it is most immediately alive through us. Saint Francis Assisi says, it is in dying to self that we are born to eternal life. What that means is the idea masking the persona, as Carl Jung would say, is like a mask on your true self. And when you take off the mask, you find that actually before you take off the mask, there is a shadow to the mask, one can say. And then there's the dualism, a symmetrical dualism, where it's as if Carl Jung was such a genius. Oh my God. He was such a genius that he figured out the dimensions in life that require to be acknowledged. You go to acknowledge the persona, you see the persona as a mask, that's emptiness. You go acknowledge, in some sense, your shadow, that's your dual self, that's the dual dimension, right? Excuse me, that's not the dual dimension. messing up the metaphor. Hold on. It's the song, guys. It is too literally trance. Like, I don't understand. Like. Of course, whoever's listening so far, keep in mind I'm just one person among 8 billion human beings, just sharing my perspective. I feel that because we have access to inner realms and the outer realms don't have access to our inner realms, this is the rarest opportunity. It's as if the body was designed to survive and the mind was designed to, in some sense, build. It's as if, like, sometimes I look at people in the construction industry, you know, and to me they are like, they don't realize it, you know, and I would say our technologies are not good enough to, you know, how to create a safe workplace, even, I would say, right? But it's as if somebody has to, like, I don't know how to say it, but it's as if, like, the moment you see something possible, you're the most instantaneous solution to the moment. You know, there is a type of leadership where the person's trying to control something. Then there is a leadership that is walking alongside nature. It is the, you know, Taoistic leader, where the Taoistic leader had no ego. Can you imagine an egoless leader? And the answer is no, because the ego is the content for the imagination. So an egoless leader is just force. It's as if we are like, you know what's strange? It's as if we're not just people, we are intelligent winds. The winds of evolution moving on the surface of this earth. The awakening of the antenna renaissance. And currently participating in the, you know, those in the frontiers of it are like 5 viewers and myself, you know. Maybe I should share some things about how I have experienced the concept of past lives and the concept of future lives. Before realizing the concept of past life and future life, something unique happened that I realized what I see as myself is not the total percentage of what I am as a being. So imagine right now my biological body included my voice and mind and character and personality and how I communicate to the audience, all of that included. But then there's also like the world included and the kind of where I am. But then imagine it's a point where I don't know how to say it. It's like everything I am now is maybe 12%, not 12 is too much. It's like maybe right now I would say, okay, let's say who I am right now is 12% of like the tip of an iceberg of what is actually intelligent here, right? Now imagine you want to see the past life and the future life of a tip of an iceberg. Right, so before you can even try to get, you know, deceived by time, you know, you in some sense before time realize whatever is in time is not the totality. This is how I feel man can transcend the existential fear. The only way you can transcend it is to see something beyond that. And militant atheists wonder why people are becoming more and more religious. Why? Because the mind is having a greater ability to perceive multidimensionality, and we're getting bored of what we have lived through. It's like that's nature's true call towards enlightenment. I would say some of the most incredible people on this planet who will change the world are people who were bored of something and decided to walk towards the new. Those are the true heroes. The system of this world is actually designed in a way where nobody can lose. And the concept of success and failure is just cultural programming. It's as if people don't need to go to a magic show to see magic. Their whole life is a magic show. We're living in a magic show. A magic show where the magician is how language becomes the world first. Human beings will pilot on, and many associations come and go. The best advice I could tell you to anybody who, let's say, whether you're someone, a yogi in the past, like someone like Buddha who had remembered all his past lives or whatnot, or let's say you're a time traveler from the future, lost in a time glitch of the space-time continuum. Sri Ramana Maharshi has an advice where he says, let what comes come, let what goes go, see what remains. See what remains. That's what we say. So in any moment of life, whoever you are, whatever you're going through, you can suddenly function in the moment as a mind that is seeing. You are a seer of intelligence. That means the mind is like the antenna can die, the antenna will break at some point, the body gets old and it's done, and we transition. But the signal that is received by the antenna is in a mind space. The poet Rumi has this incredible quote. He says, wherever you are, be the soul of that moment. I feel it's another way of saying be the unconditional presence of being in any reality you find yourself. That means allow your mind, like in this anime, this character attained ultra instinct, a state before thought where they could move. You know, that means one can, you know, like how people don't have an opinion on their heart, for example, like their actual heart and their inside their biological body. It's just this system, this natural system that is taking place, right? Now, this natural system, in accordance to the rhythms of the breath, the body is, the term is involuntary, right? So involuntarily, the body is happening. We don't have to think about ourselves breathing, we're just naturally breathing, right? So it's automated. So what we think we are actually, the free will has control over, is actually just the directing of the attention of the being, right? The body is just doing its own thing. The body is like a vehicle. So when you turn on your car engine, it's as if regardless of what happens to the car, you or the driver inside are not the car, right? So it's the same. And so while you're living a physical individual life, it is important to become aware. That means it's as if even right now, I know personally that my path, especially with this talk, is to be in a state where whatever happens in life, I can be here, but not as a concept. That means it's as if space cannot die, but matter will change, and fathom for itself time. There has been moments where in my inner realms I have got glimpses. For example, sometimes when I read quotes, I go into quote tunnels where I read a bunch of quotes. When I really read the quote, sometimes I teleport into how my mind actually fathoms that quote came from a living, alive human being, right? When we treat life like a photograph, we miss out on how much it is actually like a film. You know, and I remember there was this person on this late night show, TV program, where he said, you are the main character of your story of life, and how many people are living as side characters, and what does it really mean to be the main character? Because the main character in the story is what consciousness follows, and the story one tells one itself suggests the kind of character they will be in. That means there was a time in my life where I felt like my self-worth didn't exist. You know? And in those moments, I had this preferencelessness. That means imagine being so preferenceless that you don't have a bad thought or a good thought. You're just like there in the moment being, waiting to see how in the most simplest state, life reveals itself to you. You know? Sometimes honesty is the only key to doors beyond the senses. There has to be something serious. You know, that means how life becomes, when life becomes important, suddenly the person has energy. Just like how somebody could be tired, lazy, sleepy, but when there's an emergency, they instantly respond. Like, it's like, oh my God, you know, the stupid person became a genius when there was an emergency. You know, and so we see oh man. It's just importance. Anything you make important for yourself, you dive deeper into its conceptual design as something that will shape your life. Best analogy, we're pilots in the space-time continuum. As we pilot, we identify with moments, how much we can walk past our own moments of thought. in Zen they would say kill the Buddha. And that term was like the Zen teacher would come and say to the student that felt like they remembered in their past life they were Buddha. Like a lot of Zen meditators have felt they were Buddha in a past life. Anybody who meditates properly will feel. But the thing is that Buddha is just an awakened nature. That's what it means. There is no specific person, even though there's statues of Buddha, but it's not like it's like a principle. It's not a principle. It is like a state of mind rather than some sort of language belief. It's as if in today's society people are behaving like pigeons, and it's like the person can throw in some sense, like in regards to the marketing and media we find in television in today, like what is it? We're being sprinkled with chaos pretty much. And when I say sprinkled with chaos, I mean it's like there had the greedy dimensions of humanity, when in control of power, upon making any decision in accordance to a sort of butterfly effect, they reap the consequences. That means it doesn't matter who you are. If the way consciousness works is that it's kind of like, I believe it's the third law in regards to cause and effect. So how you cause your moment suggests what signal you send into this world, which comes back. And this concept of Mahasamadhi, where the person would pretty much consciously move beyond the body, the only way to consciously move beyond the body is to realize the fruition, the completion of the desire to be a body in the first place. I feel the archetype of the artist is perfect here, where the artist, upon finishing the masterpiece, lets go of the brush. You paint your life into the void, and then, the pilot either lands the plane into infinity, and then they Mahasamadhi as eternity, or they go beyond emptiness and they reach a state where I would say that is where Brahmaloka is. A state where there is no longer a circumstance for a thing to even be there, to be able to even reincarnate. Before I end off this episode, I would like to comment on whoever drew this. I find these pictures for these videos from this random wallpaper site, which is like this epic site. It has this random button, and when you press it, random artwork just shows up. And some of these pictures I choose for the talks, to me, are so magnificent. There's something so magnificent about it that I feel it has to be shared. Because it's as if like wisdom and art, you know what it is? Wisdom is like the uncle of art, Or let me say it in a hilarious way. Art is like the cousin of wisdom, That means when the serious event happens, art and all the wisdom traditions will unite, and this has been there. In every spiritual tradition, there has been a sort of artwork, imagery, symbolism, and some sort of relationship with the unfathomable supernatural, In this picture that we're seeing, whoever the artist is, maybe he's left his own credit in the picture, but what I see is a society where trust has been destroyed. Do you know whether if aliens land and we have diplomatic relationships with future extraterrestrials that land, let's say hypothetically, the extraterrestrials will be walking among us. That means imagine some human beings go live on that extraterrestrial's planet, and some extraterrestrials come and live on our planet. we have for the first time extraterrestrial immigration policy. And so imagine, I'm talking about a future situation, right? And imagine extraterrestrials are walking the street, or imagine before extraterrestrials, cyberspace, androids begin walking the street with unique programs of consciousness created out of the infinitude and the potential where I dedicated a book on this called Heaven a Principia, where what I said was that irrational numbers they hide the secret to the personality of the embodied AI in society in the future. The supreme is the path of inferiority. That means when you are at the simplest moment of your life and you're able to be with the simplest presence of your own being, then the complexity doesn't startle you, but it can disturb you, and whatever happens, it is the trust of the intelligence in the moment that wins. And one must ask the question that if in the future we can even become robots as a civilization, let's say people, they want a cooler arm, they get a robotic arm, let's say it gets so out of control, with the habitual mind of the animal, that people in the future all just want to become robots because it's cool, You see in films like the daughter comes to at the family dinner to the father and says, I want to get a tattoo, and the father's like, no daughter of mine's going to get a tattoo. Imagine in the future, the daughter comes to the father and says, all the kids in my school became robots, Dad, I want to be a robot too. And the father's like, no daughter of mine's going to be a robot. And so the future imagine androids walking, and imagine androids, they are even the presence old. I have seen this concept of the wisps. Nobody has created it yet. Not that nobody has created it yet, but I think nobody has taken this idea to its future. And what it is that we're going to have hologram people walking in the street in the future. And these hologram people, the person could be, let's say, in Japan, and they want to know what it's like living in Canada. And so this sphere in the streets of Canada, imagine, activates, and they become a hologram. And from Japan, they can experience walking in the streets through a cyberspace accurate simulation of for example, where the hologram is. So we can imagine going to the grocery stores in the future, let's say just for old time's sake. And we're walking to the grocery store, and in doing so, we are seeing not extraterrestrial, let's say, but let's say we're watching androids walking in the street. We're watching, we see, even let's say in the future, animals have technology connected to them, and they begin being able to become as mature as human consciousness. So imagine animals with AI connected to them are walking in the streets. And so you see, that is the world we live in. Human psychology is a luxury. And I think we right now have time. Until the year 2050, cyberspace culture will not animate. Because cyberspace culture, unfortunately, in modern times has associated itself with a sort of post-apocalyptic denial revolution. So what I mean is that if the species, and imagine the species, the whole planet and the species is at a certain energy level, right? If this energy level goes down, the people, the species will identify with its misery more, with its suffering more. So it will believe suffering before believing the ultimate, before believing enlightenment, moksha, nirvana, you know? Whereas a simple man would say to discover why the light is in your eyes, or why this moment has come. And honestly, I feel in history books there will be a round of applause for all those people who aimed to have multidimensional perspectives in an era where society and history is just identifying with like a photograph of itself. The true mankind is awakening. This is the coolest time to be alive, to discover and to see what the collective emergence of intelligence beyond current circumstance, how it happens. Because in the future, I'm telling you, if we just live a materialistic life as a species, what will happen was, I will give it prediction, in 40 years we will become all stationary cyberspace experiencers of reality. And that's a strange time, because it's as if like nature is being forgotten. So when nature can't go anywhere because technology is here, so there will always be a rebellion, So imagine waking up from a simulation inside another simulation, and you're like, God damn, another universal rebellion. And so as you hop between worlds, and let's say you're a sort of universal archetype of an intelligence that finds itself animating when civilizations reach the threshold of their potential. They reach the point where their potential operates. There's going to be so many advanced communicators in the future that, like, I think if I'm still around in this realm as an old man, I'll be just like trying to find the most comfortable chair, to just observe reality. I honestly feel like in the future there might be these buildings that hover in the air, and so senior, let's say, citizen homes, retirement homes are all gonna be floating in the sky, and the elderly will never get bored. They'll get to see the world, What is life about? How we walked into the future. That's it. That's the meaning of life. How you walk into the future. If you have a rhythm to it, or if you just let the void dissolve in the void. What else can happen? We either aim for infinity, or we let nature remind us how we're nothing. Survival is a game. Life is honestly a video game, but it's a video game, where again, elements instead of pixels. And in the future, there's going to be so much human honor. Let me tell you why. Because nobody would be able to judge each other. Because we have discovered our multidimensionality. Our multidimensionality knows better. And in our educational systems, anybody because we're in the pioneer phase of like the next great, evolution of communication, I think here. In some sense, at least. are language incarnate. We are the periodic table is reincarnating everywhere. And let's not call it the search for truth, but the calling towards the ultimate. When that wind of evolution finds the person, there is no longer a teacher, no spirit guide, no something else needs to be there. When one goes into a state where they realize the mind is all alone with itself, and this is why love is very crucial, where a person has to love their own eyes in order for it to function, their intelligence. Everybody should communicate or attempt to communicate and share something with the civilization. Think of it this way, that we're all like again, pilots and stewards, advanced communicators and pilots, and people who are in some sense advancing, the inner and the outer. I just honestly want to see all universities hold like this global, conference, and select a certain day. Let's call it January 1st. Okay, whatever. Let's just. The educational systems all around the planet should just be like, dear students, everything we have found about knowledge doesn't need to be learned because we have found it. What needs to be found is that you learn as much of the past you need to explore and find something new about the future, right? So when the educational system becomes like this calling towards the ultimate stance of humanity, it's like then everybody would want to go to school. Anyways, guys, for those interested, I'll be on Discord. I guess I'll end the episode here. Final comments. Before your eyes were your eyes. The universe was being a universe without the word universe or the concept universe needed. When it comes to memory making us a judgmental animal, at some point we look in the mirror and we're like, okay, what can we do about it? It's like we're a judgmental animal. People have a violent dimension, and what can we do to advance the minds of everybody and to see what that would even look like? The judgmental animal has to realize the spectrum is infinite and judgment ends. You can, till the end of time, infinitely find reasons to not like something or to like something. The mind is like a paintbrush, it can attempt the infinite. Anyways, guys, thanks for listening. I'll be on Discord for those interested.